Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to continue to talk about what is Magic the Gathering today, okay? And so here's my supposition. Magic the Gathering has a new purpose in 2025. And the reason why is, so what is Magic the Gathering? Most people, if you ask them what Magic the Gathering is, they won't know, right? But within the tabletop gaming community, people do know, and they would give you the answer that Magic the Gathering is a collectible card game. I don't think that's any longer true. I don't think that's true. And the reason why is specifically James Wyatt, but let's get all the way there. So my supposition is that Magic the Gathering is simply, they print cards. They do about probably 5 to 15, they do 7 to 15 sets a year now, okay? Now, those sets, they print cards. It is my supposition that every single Magic card printed is simply unbound pages of Dungeons & Dragons rules and lore, okay? Now, I know this is incredibly complicated, and I'm the only person on the planet saying this, but it's because I'm the only person on the planet who understands Dungeons & Dragons lore. There are things happening on Dungeons & Dragons intellectual property that have never happened on any intellectual property in the world, right? So let's talk about the how and the why today. Now, the how and why are extremely related to the where, what, and who. And so what I already told you, right? Magic the Gathering is unbound pages of Dungeons & Dragons canon, okay? Split between rules and lore, okay? The where is United States of America. The who is the really important part, and it directly explains the how and the why. Who? Peter Adkison. I believe that he subconsciously, he had a lot of passion for Dungeons & Dragons. He met Richard Garfield and realized that the two of them, understanding what Dungeons & Dragons did, which is tactical infinity, that they knew that if they could bring here's what I think. Peter Adkison subconsciously knew that Dungeons & Dragons business model is absolute, unmitigated, pure garbage. Without a doubt. I could tell you right now, Dungeons & Dragons has the absolute most garbage business model ever. It is pure diggity garbage. There is no good business model for Dungeons & Dragons. It's terrible. You pay $150. You get the DMG, the MM, and the PHP. You don't need anything for the rest of your life. You could tell a million stories and get every pay and never need another book. It's a terrible, terrible business model. So Peter Adkison understood that, and then he flipped it, right? So what he did was he worked with Richard Garfield, got the best rules engine that has ever been created outside of Dungeons & Dragons, and brought Dungeons & Dragons Tactical Infinity to a model that frat boys could play. That's the whole of it. That is the whole of it. Okay. All right. So Peter Adkison, and then made those millions and literally bought Dungeons & Dragons, which I think subconsciously was his intention all along. All right. And so with that said, okay, so Peter Adkison. Then Richard Garfield, it's not debatable. Richard Garfield has said it. He built Dungeons & Dragons literally into the package, right? Like he said, the two inspirations for Magic the Gathering are Dungeons & Dragons. There's tons of Dungeons & Dragons. You can see it all over the game, right? And then also Cosmic Encounters. I don't know nothing about Cosmic Encounters. Nobody cares about Cosmic Encounters. That's not part of it. He mentioned it, but it's not, it's like, the pickles are on a burger. That ain't the burger, right? Like, so, okay. So Richard Garfield built Dungeons & Dragons right into it. And the last is James Wyatt. This is really important. James Wyatt brought, these modules, okay? So that's the how. That is the how. And I actually covered that in my last video, but yeah. All right, now why? Why did all this happen? All this happened because of Gary Gygax's legacy, right? So Gary Gygax, the reason why all these guys were pointing themselves toward Dungeons & Dragons is Gary Gygax is the first guy in history to do an epic historic turn but not connected to traditional power. Okay, so George Washington. Actually, let's do it this way. 3 great Americans, right? Lincoln, right? So Lincoln was, okay, I'm going to free Americans who need to be free, and he did, right? Lincoln literally freed, millions of Americans who had no freedom, right? And so basically, and then because of that, Lincoln has been able to speak from the grave far more than he ever did in life. So he had a legacy where his impact and his speech was more powerful in death than life. Harriet Tubman, right? She is the free runner, the world's first and greatest free runner, okay? And she said, hey, don't ever she said, once you get your freedom, you go and you give other people freedom, right? And to this day, we honor Harriet Tubman and realize that she was this cleric among people, and that her religious fervor and her physical passion, right, to free other Americans, like, really delivered this super special, super unique, awesome reality, right, for everyone. And then what Gary did was he came along and said, I'm going to use narrative and identity to fix all of humanity. And that's where we are. So that is the why. Okay. Now, we now know the who, now know the who, the where, the what, the how, and the why. This has massive ramifications, and I will dig into the ramifications of this in my next video. Thank you very much for your patience. Let me explain all this. The ramifications, I think, is very significant, and we're going to get into this, right? So what are the ramifications of Magic the Gathering being a vessel for Dungeons & Dragons canon today, and that being its primary purpose? Far more important, far more substantial, far more significant than it functioning as a CCG. All right, collectible card game. Every single word you heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.